And you know, that's a great introduction. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So yeah, my name is Rachel Armstrong. Um, I'm the executive director of Farm Commons. I'm joining you from northern Minnesota. So it's not snowing yet, but it's not unheard of to have snow already. Fortunately, my kids are already in bed. This is a really good time for me. If you wanted it a little bit earlier in the day, well, you know, then there'd be the craziness of bedtime and things like that. So personally, this is where I grew up. This is where my family is from for about 130 years back. Came over on the boats from Norway and found that Duluth, Minnesota was kind of similar. It's cold and it's rocky. So here we are. I live here with my husband. We have three children. We have a 4-year-old twins and a 5-year-old who just went into kindergarten. So that keeps things very exciting around here. Um, my background is all in food and farming. It's what I've always done. It's what I've always known. I grew up on the old derelict dairy farm that my father milked cows on and his dad before him. So farming and rural life has always been a part of what I've known. I had no idea that I would be an attorney and that I would start Farm Commons. I really came to that process because throughout the work I was doing for farmers, which included, you know, working on farms, doing a lot of vegetable production, doing a lot of marketing. I did a lot of farm to restaurant type work, trying to develop markets and create promotion programs. Throughout all that stuff, I would get legal questions. I would get questions like, for my restaurants, can I make yogurt in my kitchen because the health inspector says no? Or from my farmers, you know, hey, should I be forming an LLC? Different things like that. One day, I had an attorney that I was working with on some contracts say to me, you know what, Rachel, all of this stuff about CSA, where people pay ahead for product and it's delivered to them at intervals throughout the year, well, that stuff is not legal. I was like, what do you mean that's not legal? You know, we've built a lot of a lot of farms on this concept. So if it's not legal, somebody should really tell us now. Being that I couldn't get answers to essential questions like that, I thought, gosh, somebody should go to law school and start to figure this stuff out. So I did. Thank goodness law school is 3 years, because that gave me 3 years to figure out how I was going to build this organization to answer the questions for farmers. So that's how Farm Commons came to be. By the time I was done with law school, I'd worked out a structure for what we were going to do and how, and here we are. So if this is the first time you've heard about us, this is what we do. We educate farmers all around the country on farm law issues. Insurance is one of our most popular topics, and we lead educational programming around the country on a wide variety of insurance subjects. And a lot of the things we'll cover today: crop insurance, liability insurance, disability, health insurance, all the good stuff. But farm law is very vast. Employment law is another of our areas of specialty. We also focus on business structures, sales contracts. So you can go to Farm Commons for all kinds of basic legal education. We think it's education that you need and deserve to be able to run your business well. So that's the basics of what we do. We're a membership organization, and so the bulk of what we offer is available to members, which is affordable if you're interested in that. But also these kinds of presentations, webinars, conference events, all that is a great way to get this information as well. Your thoughts and questions and your perspective are very important. We're here for you, and so I see in the chat box, because I'm the host, we can't turn folks over to panelists. I can do it, and I might be able to talk and click buttons at the same time. So I'm going to work away on that, and because I would love if you all have the ability to unmute yourself. I can end up talking a lot. I'm not really proud of that, so jump in. This will also, if you have your camera on, let me see you. And I like that too. It's certainly not an obligation. I understand if you've got kids running around or dogs or anything. All right, so so make use of the unmute button in the chat box. All right. Bear with me as I scoot some things around. We do a lot of online programming, so I have a precise little arrangement I strive to have. Okay, your first chance to talk. Let's talk about risk. Tell me about the things you worry about for your operation. All the things. And this isn't metaphorical, I'm really telling you. Tell me, what is it that weighs on your mind in terms of risk? Unmute yourself or use the chat box.
Food safety.
Food safety, good one. Now, Ivy, I think that was, Ivy, if you could give me a little bit more context, tell me about the bad thing that could happen.
Not sure, I haven't gotten there yet, but we're building a wash pack facility, and we're going to be using it ourselves along with our partner farmers who rent some of the land. And so sharing the space and staying compliant, we worry about.
Awesome. Okay. Legal compliance, good one. That somebody could get sick from the food. And because you talked about other people using that pack shed, maybe it's because of something they did and not something that you did. Excellent questions.
Flooding.
Flooding. Oh man. Yeah. That's a big one. And honestly, kind of hard to insure around, but we'll get to that. It's a good one.
I worry about someone getting hurt on the farm,
okay,
like with farm tours or, something like that.
Yep. So the proverbial falling into a hole, trip and fall kinds of things. Okay. Sometimes I hear people are worried about dog bites or bee stings or getting kicked by a goat. I know there's more on your mind.
Well, it's not really like an insurance thing, at least I don't think it is, but I worry that we won't be able to sell everything that we grow, and that we're going to have a good yield this year, all of those things too, obviously.
Thank you for bringing that up. These don't have to be concerns that are fixed with insurance, because at the end part of the presentation, we will talk about some things that aren't insurable and what are some other strategies to manage those risks. And that's a great one. That's a marketing risk. One I'll sneak in there, getting injured yourself. Or what about employees getting hurt? Those are things that, especially when the labor market is so tight.
Yeah. What about if we have volunteers out on the farm?
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Oh yeah, Ari put in the chat, ag theft is big too.
Yes. Thank you. And I see that they also put in profitability. India hooked me up with some great people who shared with me more about the unique situation of Hawaii producers, and I learned vandalism is much more of a problem than it is out here. So that's another good one.
Ari, I know that you had the personal story that your whole kalo crop was taken. She's not on the farm. They didn't have surveillance cameras. How could her crop have been protected? It's a crop that's in the ground for a long time, a big investment, a lot of vulnerability in the field.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yep. We will get to these things. In the United States of America, most things are insurable, and that is too. Of course, the question is at what cost? So we'll talk about those things.
And Rachel, you'll get into some low cost options too, some creative options.
Some options of last resort, yes. Yep. Okay, well, those are very relevant risks, and we will talk about different angles to approach all of those things today. I also want to sneak in the risks of disagreement and debt in terms of your interpersonal relationships. Many of you may farm with a partner, a loved one, and honestly, the thing that usually takes down a farm business or agricultural operation is something like divorce, is something like disagreements between the parties about how the business should be run. And it's not like farms are special in that realm. You know, anytime two people go into business together, there's a lot of potential for disagreement. And that's a very real risk. And it's one that we can address, not with insurance, but we'll get to that. So I just wanted to lift that up as a very significant risk that we really shouldn't ignore right at the outset. So specifically, we're going to talk about some buckets of risk today. First, we got our production risks. Things go wrong in terms of the production of the crops or livestock. Number two, marketing risks. Things go wrong when you are at the point of sale. The price drops or things like that, or your buyer flakes out on you. Injury risks. People or customers or guests or folks delivering inputs get injured. We can touch on you getting injured. I didn't actually write those slides in, but if somebody wants to talk about that, we're happy to do that. Injury to employees as well. Then facility and property risks. One of the key distinctions we're going to get into today is that is the growing crop, is it at some point it transitions from becoming something that's just growing in the ground and is affixed to the ground when it's still attached to the tree to becoming property. And a lot of times it becomes property at the point in which it is harvested, put in a cooler, put in a box. And so then you need a different insurance product to insure it after that. We're going to talk about non-compliance risks. And that's, not complying with regulations. Another of those things you can't insure for, but we will address how to tackle that one. And then, of course, debt and financial risks. So those are our buckets for today's discussion. I'm going to jump right into a key learning point. The reality is that in the United States of America, we primarily manage risk through insurance. I bring this up as a key knowledge point because other countries don't necessarily do it this way. Other countries have public programs that they use to manage risk. They might have regulations in lieu of insurance. They just tell you what to do and you have to do it, or the government comes after you. The United States is a bit unique in that we, as a matter of public policy, have preferred to route risk through insurance companies. And then we let the private market determine what risks are insurable, which risks are not. We let the private market determine what's the premium for that. And the private market uses actuarial science to determine these policies. Who gets insured, who doesn't, and what it costs. It is all based on data. It's not based on what is right or good or protects American farmers or preserves legacy or agricultural heritage. That is not the concern of the of the risk management business when it comes to insurance. They are private companies. They exist to make a profit. Sometimes you can find insurance companies that are organized as mutuals. That's like the co-op of the insurance world. So they don't exist strictly to make a profit. They exist to serve their members. So there are some different flavors of insurance. But I bring up for you right away that this is a business relationship. You're buying a business product, and the business product is only whatever it says it is. There's no, these are not benevolent folks. It's just an insurance company. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is the language that is in the insurance contract. Some of that language we don't have access to as regular consumers. Sometimes we don't even get the policy until after we bought the product. We don't even know what we're buying until after we've bought it. We are trusting the insurance agent and trusting the insurance company. And that's unfortunately not that different sometimes when you're buying a government subsidized product like most crop insurance, as opposed to a strictly private product like property insurance. So, you know, this is the way it is. And I just wanted to center us on that fact first and foremost, that insurance is a private business transaction. And we're going to get into some of the details of what you're going to find when you peek under the hood. First, we're going to start with our production and marketing risks. These are easier. These are easier because, right, like I've said here on the slide, these are federally subsidized crop insurance products. So the federal government has a hand in the creation of these crop insurance products. That's nice because it's actually easier to get good information from the government. They're obligated to provide us with some more substantial information. So if you want, and you don't want, trust me, to read these extensive manuals on how the federally subsidized policies work, you can have that. So that's really nice. Now, these federally subsidized policies cover you for a variety of things, but they really focus on acts that are outside of your control. Acts of God, that's what folks sometimes call them. So your weather events, your insects, and even for some of these policies, decline in prices. So we'll get into a little bit more detail on exactly what they cover. But bear in mind at this point that these are all purchased from private insurance agents, even though they're a government product. It's pretty easy to find who your private insurance agents are. I'm going to paste a link in the chat box. You can go here, agent locator page, and you can look up an insurance agent that is in your area who is licensed to sell these products that I'm about to tell you about. I also want you to know that any agent who sells federally subsidized crop insurance is required to sell all of the policies. So if you like multi-peril, you can go to one of these agents and say, I want multi-peril. If you like whole farm revenue protection, you can go to them and say, I want this one. NAP, you have to go to FSA. When we get to that, I'll emphasize that NAP is a little bit different. So let's get into it. We're going to start with multi-peril insurance. All right, multi-peril. It's a great place to begin because it has some serious limitations. Multi-peril crop insurance is available for coffee, papaya, banana, and macadamia nut production in Hawaii. You can insure both the tree itself for its present and future production and for the fruit, so just that season's crop. Multi-peril insurance is going to protect you against weather, wildfire, fire, eruption, you know, some sort of act of God, but it will not cover you for vandalism or crop theft. Those are not acts of God. So it's useful for what we call production risks, the natural risks of producing that crop. So imagine if people were not around and things like, you know, theft and vandalism weren't there. It's just, what is nature going to do to you? Flooding can be a little tricky, but you want to ask some questions when you're buying this policy about exactly what kind of flooding is going to be covered under the multi-peril policy, because some kinds of flooding are covered and sometimes are not. If it's a rain event, you're probably good. If it's a dam breaking, you might not be good. So it's pretty limited in the crops that it will address. Fairly broad in terms of the acts of God that it covers. Now, the indemnity is the legal word for the amount that you receive. Horrible things happen, you know, your crop is lost and your trees are dead. Well, then you get your indemnity. This is based on your standard commodity price. And so it's the distinction I want to make is it's not your price. It's not the price you negotiated for from your buyers. It's not the price you normally receive. It's the commodity price that the USDA understands as the standard. So to give you an example, and you can look all these up, the example for papayas a few years ago, the commodity price for papaya was 47 cents a pound. So that's the price that they're going to consider your crop to be worth, 47 cents a pound. Now from there, you pick your coverage level. 50% is the lowest. Let me see here in my notes. I think 85% is the highest. So you can pick between that range for what sort of coverage that you want. So if you pick 50% and you're insured at 47 cents a pound for your papaya, you're getting half that. So cut that 47 cents in half. That's the amount you're actually going to receive for your papaya. If you have 5,000 pounds of papaya that you lost, you get $1,175. So determining what you're going to come out with at the end can be fairly easy. And that's how people will look at this to decide, gosh, is this worth it? And not everybody makes the same choice about that. Some people will say, oh my goodness, $1,175, that's not worth the paperwork. I was going to sell this. I mean, I have the best papaya. My papaya is identified to my farm and I sell it at, the farmer's market, or I sell it to local restaurants or somewhere where, it's identity preserved and high quality, and I'm getting 3 times that. I'm getting double that. For those folks, they look at multi-peril and say, it's not worth it. But for folks that are producing at volume and are selling at commodity prices anyways, not a bad deal. It's $1,000 more than they were going to get before. So only you can tell. Very soon, I will give you a link to where you can use a price calculator where you can enter in exactly what's the premium that you would pay for this kind of coverage. So the cost is subsidized by the federal government, and the federal government is usually taking about half of the premium. So you're only paying half of the premium that you would otherwise expect to pay if this were strictly a market-based product. But, you're not getting a lot. So the disadvantages of multi-peril can be pretty clear. It's only for these 4 crops, and the prices that they provide are quite low. So looking at those drawbacks, USDA, I think maybe 8 years ago now, said, hey, we got to get a new policy for folks. And so they did. They created a new policy. It's called Whole Farm Revenue Protection, or WFRP for short. WFRP is really important because the indemnity, the price you receive, is based on the farm's actual historic revenue, not on commodity prices. It's based on the price you have historically received for your product. So if you have markets that are direct to consumer, identity preserved, organic, specialty, farm identified, whatever the case may be, if you're getting more for your product, this is a much better avenue to look down. This is also a much better opportunity for folks that are producing something other than coffee, papaya, banana, and macadamia nuts, especially if they are producing multiple crops. So your diversified, smaller scale operations are looking much more at WFRP. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if it's just me, but I'm still on the multi-peril slide.
Oh, thank you. There we go. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah. So actual historic revenue, folks who it's valuable for. So you're going to insure multiple crop products under one policy. You have to grow at least 2 things to get a WFRP policy. So as long as you got at least 2 things, you can take a look at this. You can even insure for livestock products, like if you have some poultry or eggs or things like that. You can't have too much livestock. They do set thresholds that vary on the total amount of insurance you're total amount of insurance that goes to livestock production. It's available to any farm in the United States, so certainly anyone in Hawaii can get it. It insures against similar risks, that being natural causes of loss. So again, we're out of luck here on our vandalism and theft issues. So a little bit more on WFRP. What you really need to know is that if you want to take advantage of this policy, good records and a Schedule F tax filing are essential. Now, they're essential for a number of different reasons. You need, no matter what your gross production is, you need to understand your average production per crop. You also need to understand what's your revenue for the past 5 years. I'm sorry, I'm saying this backwards. If your operation grosses more than 100,000 in the year, you need to know your acreage per crop and your revenue per crop for the past 5 years. This is a real challenge for a lot of producers nationwide. And from what I've learned talking with many farm advocates in Hawaii, it may be especially problematic for Hawaii producers. Folks in Hawaii have exceptionally diversified production. Some of this, some of that. Average crop production and average crop revenues can vary highly over the course of the year or the production season. And so oftentimes those precise records that aren't kept per crop, and so it's difficult to make the filing. It's also essential that we do a Schedule F. Schedule F, if you aren't familiar, is when you report to the IRS how much money you made from farming. You are legally required to do a Schedule F, at which point you are running a business. When are you running a business? That can actually be hard to say. It can be hard to determine when an individual is transitioning from this is my hobby to this is my business. So a lot of farms don't make that transition quickly. They'll kind of stall. They'll decide not to file the Schedule F because they know that then the taxes are going to come to bear on their income from farming. So not wanting that to happen, they're going to keep treating this like a hobby. That can be bad in the long run. It can be a really good idea to go ahead and position yourself to make a Schedule F filing. Sure, you are saying to the federal government, to the IRS, I run a business, please tax me on my profits. But at the same time, you're saying to USDA, I am a legitimate farmer and I deserve crop insurance and I should be eligible for it. So there's, of course, some downsides to taking the step to file the Schedule F, but there's some upsides to it as well. So take a hard look at Schedule F and if it's right for you. Did I hear a question in there? No? Okay. So the Schedule F, the average per crop and the revenue per crop. Now, this was just about a week ago. The USDA, this is the Risk Management Agency, they're the ones that design the WFRP policy. They came out and said, look, folks, we've got something new. Now, we have a microfarm option, which is brand new for 2022. If your operation is a gross revenue of 100,000 or less, you don't need to report revenue and expenses per crop. You do need to be able to report your revenue and expenses in total for your farm operation. So let's say you're still at the beginning stages. You're still, maybe you just filed a Schedule F, maybe you are a sole proprietor, and so you're still like using the same bank account for your dinner as opposed to your crop inputs. And maybe you're not keeping really robust records because you kind of figure it out at the end of the year. You just sort of dig through the receipts and try to figure out what your revenue and expenses are. That is going to be more of a problem over the long term. So even though you don't have to report it per crop, you've got to be able to have a really solid idea of what are your revenue and expenses total for your operation. In all honesty, this can introduce some conflicts for some beginning producers. You're at a point right now, many beginning producers, because you don't want to show a lot of profit. You know, you don't want to pay taxes on that profit. So there's some downward pressure to make sure that your expenses are high, and to make sure that you're investing in your farm, you're buying the equipment and, you know, the packaging and the resources and the facilities that you need. So a lot of folks, even as revenue increases, expenses also increase. So we manage our tax burdens and we make sure that, that we're investing in our farm business consistently. Not necessarily a problem, because what you're doing with WFRP is ensuring your revenue. So you make sure that that keeps coming in the door. Just make sure it's tracked, and then it's tracked consistently. You can't say one thing on your Schedule F and then tell a different thing for the WFRP policy. And I'm not saying anyone's doing any tricks here. It just can be that records are inconsistent enough that we come up with different numbers every time we look at it. If we come up with different numbers every time we look at it, there's a chance that these two filings will cross paths, what you told the IRS and what you told Risk Management Agency for the purposes of your crop insurance policy. You don't want that to happen. You want a clear understanding of what are your revenue and expenses. And I'm going to go back up to my other slide. If your gross revenue exceeds 100,000, again, that's got to be per crop. That's some advanced record keeping. A lot of folks don't get to that point till they've been in business for 10 years and they're thinking, oh my goodness, is producing this really worth it? Am I actually making money on this crop? I know my customers love it. I know I'm really good at growing it, but do I make money? That's advanced analysis. But to take advantage of WFRP, if you gross more than that, you got to start doing it at the beginning, because that's how you're going to make sure that you're getting what you deserve. You're getting the indemnity that you deserve because it's based on your actual revenue. All right. Any questions so far on that before I wrap up a few points? Oh, I see one. Is there a certain point at which you have to file a Schedule F? Technically, not for the IRS. You know, is the IRS going to, okay, this is a complicated question. It's more like there's a point at which you want to file a Schedule F. That's really what you're getting at, because you can't get credit for your business losses if you're not filing a Schedule F. If you're not acting like a business, if you're not saying to the IRS, I'm a business, tax me like a business, you can't get credit for your losses. All you can do is continue to pay taxes on the profits. And so usually it's a person it's the business owner who's like, now is the point at which I would like my losses to offset my income earned elsewhere. Or I'd like to carry over my losses to the next year and reduce future income. So people, farm business owners have a natural incentive to start filing a Schedule F at some point as well, when they're really investing in the business. So, but technically, is there a point at which you have to? There is if you want to participate in government programs like this. Then you, like for WFRP, you must file Schedule F. Or what India was talking about when our program began, if you want to participate in other government programs like CFAP and the pandemic payments that are going out, by and large, those are only available to people who file a Schedule F. It's the government's official marker that you farm. That's really what establishes in the government's eyes that you farm. That's what F stands for. So, so when you want that recognition, because you want the benefits, the resources that come with it, it's the way to go. Now, from the IRS's perspective, they're more based on when can you file a Schedule F so that you can get credit for your losses. And from their perspective, it is at which point this transitions from a hobby to a business. Once it's not a hobby and it is a business, you get to take credit. You get to credit your losses. So that transition point can be really hard to identify, but the material that they put out says it depends on how much effort you're putting in. Have you written a business plan? Are you, you know, do you have a marketing effort? Did you create a website? You know, are you striving? It's a really difficult to understand threshold.
Rachel, I don't know if there's any questions here because, you know, the real focus is kind of like, how do we make that transition? How do we get our record keeping in place? But do you have any kind of recommendations for those who, you know, haven't really got down a good system for tracking their expenses, or what kind of, you know, if they haven't got to like having a balance sheet, what kind of accounting, or what's kind of a simple way to transition if you're still doing the receipts and the shoebox and you're pulling it out at the end of the year, or if you're just roughly tracking the.
Right. So there isn't necessarily a simple way to do it. Business accounting is, well, I shouldn't have said that right off because that made it sound like, oh, well, then it must be hard. It's not that it's hard. It's that this is a diligent process of education. And there are some excellent resources out there to help you get started on, my book is elsewhere, but the first thing I would look at is a book called Fearless Farm Finances. It is written specifically for farmers to understand bookkeeping and record keeping and financial management. So the Fearless Farm Finances book is a great resource to start with. If you Google it, it's going to come right up. You can buy a copy. It's published by an outfit near me, and they don't make a lot of money off it. So it's affordable. It's a really good deal. They also run an intensive workshop to help farmers understand how to get started making that transition out of the shoebox. So I will say that it's not hard. Oh, thank you. There you go. But it requires developing some baseline knowledge. Now, for a lot of folks, the thing you're going to need to really make this process easier is an accounting software. Most folks are using some form of accounting software that so that they're not actually assembling the spreadsheets themselves. The spreadsheets can, you know, strike terror in the average person's heart, and you don't have to do that. There's really affordable software programs out there that can help any small business owner get a start. You don't even have to, that way, you don't have to have really any awareness of the actual math and how things are done. You have to understand how to read the report that comes out. So look at things like QuickBooks. I can use a personal example. So when I started Farm Commons, I had no background at all in anything accounting. I never run a business. I'd never, you know, done anything like that. And I opened up a QuickBooks account. I just started using their software, and I found it quite easy to use. You know, you literally do things like enter in the checks that you wrote, enter in the bills that you have to pay. Then you literally like click a button that says pay the bills. And then, you know, you tell them that you paid the bill. There are places where you can upload receipts so that you can move beyond just keeping things in the shoebox. So as a person with, me personally, as a person with no training in any accounting, and a person who's terrified of numbers, I did my own books for 5 years. So you can do it too. And I really relied on the software to help me understand what to do. Now, how to read the financial reports that come out of that. How do you read a balance sheet? What does a balance sheet mean? How, when you look at it, what story is it telling you? And how do you understand that story and then make decisions based on it? That's the part that really takes much more of the training. The software is taking care of the part where, you know, you're writing checks and logging receipts, but it can't tell you what your finances mean to you. So that's where the Fearless Farm Finances is perfect. It's not geared for more of a Hawaii style production. It definitely uses a lot of Midwestern examples, but it being the primary farm business product out there, farm business book for finances, it's still a good choice to go. India, if you also want to talk about specialized training, if you know Poppy Davis from California, well, she lives in California, but she is more of a consultant. She works with a lot of companies. She also leads intensive advanced programming on how do you get away from the shoebox and into accounting software.
Great, thank you for that resource. I just saw her present at the Farm Viability Conference this week, so thank you.
Yeah, she's been great. And on another personal note, I work closely with Poppy to, you know, once I was kind of over doing all the books myself and my fear of numbers, you know, I was just really tired of that. I worked with Poppy to help Farm Commons graduate to the next level of accounting and business management. So for me, that process worked really well. I did as much as I could for as long as I could, and then I was in a great position to graduate because I had a deep understanding of what was going on, you know, with my expenses and things like that. What we haven't talked about so far is, what do these products cost? What can you expect to pay for them? And, you know, there's no way to say what these policies are worth to you if you don't know what they're going to cost you. The government has done a pretty good job of helping you out with that. They have a premium calculator. So you literally type in, this is the policy I'm looking at, the multi-peril, whole farm revenue protection. This is how much I grow. You know, if it's whole farm revenue protection, you have to say what your revenue is on that crop, and they tell you, this is what it's going to cost. So it's that easy. And then, you know, you can weigh for yourself, is that cost going to be worth it to me? And if it is, you talk to a crop insurance agent for more detail to actually purchase the policy. There's a couple of cautions, though, that I want to give you once you get to this point. I've made it seem easy so far. You look up the premium, you call the crop insurance agent. In reality, it hasn't been that easy for a lot of producers. In the state of Hawaii, there have been a mere handful of whole farm revenue protection policies sold for the whole time that this policy has been available. So I couldn't get precise numbers, but it's something like 8 to 10 in the entire state. So this policy is still relatively new, and people think that the premium is competitive, but they're not completely diving in the deep end of the pool yet. So that means the crop insurance agent that you call, when you say, I'd like to purchase whole farm revenue protection, they're going to say, what? You're like, you know, whole farm revenue protection, the federal crop insurance policy. And they're like, oh, right, I heard about that. But they've never sold one. And it's a lot of work, actually, for them to prepare this policy, because they have to learn this entirely new policy, and it's paperwork heavy. So we got to be honest about that up front. The insurance agent might not want to sell you it because they're not going to make more money off it, and they're going to have to invest a lot of time and effort into learning and executing the paperwork. So what I can offer you is you should consider contacting an agent with a fellow farmer. Consider if one of your peers is also interested in this policy, that when you call them, you say, but it's not just me, I have a friend, they're also interested. So trying to convey to them, look, I promise, this is going to be more worth your while. I know you're going to have to do some work and invest in your training to figure this out, but it's not just me. And the more farmers who are interested, the more you're going to be able to get an insurance agent to really engage with you and give you the service that you deserve. Technically, all crop insurance agents who sell any federal policies are required to sell all of the policies. So it's not that they aren't, they're not allowed to not sell you the policy, but it happens. It happens all the time where they don't want to, and farmers don't end up with the policy. So be aware that you do have to be diligent to try to actually get one of these sold to you. Another thing to be very aware of is that the payment can be received up to a year or more after experiencing the loss. Now you got to report your loss within 72 hours of discovering that you incurred that loss. So, you have insect damage, or you have a windstorm and you've lost your crop, you have 72 hours to report that loss. But you're not going to see the money, you're not going to see the compensation until after your tax year closes and you file your taxes and about 30 days have gone by. That could be a whole year, especially if you don't file your taxes right away and wait till the last possible date to do that. So that can be a problem for some folks. They're like, oh my goodness, I'm only going to get $1,000 and it's going to take me a year to get it. So something to keep in mind. But I've taken up a lot of the air. Does anyone have their own experience with these policies, with multi-peril or whole farm revenue protection? And does anyone have experience transitioning to QuickBooks or another accounting software?
Other half of not no sandwich.
I actually have a question. I tried using that search engine to look up an insurance agent, and nothing was found in proximity to Hawaii. The closest was in California, I think.
That's weird, because I know that they have sold a few policies.
Yeah, so a lot of our
least.
agents, you guys, are actually out of California but serve us. So the thing is, it's because we don't have, so we're underserved basically, but a lot of those agents that are from California serve us. So it's just that we don't show up on there, but and I know, some farmers have gone through this process. So for us personally, getting insurance for our farm, we called around to other farmers, and it was hard. It was pretty hard to find an agent that would work with us. So I think that strategy of calling with another farmer is an experience. Or to reference, I had, Dan recommend that I call you, something like that. Yeah, so there's a few, so this locator is helpful. A lot of those California ones will serve us. Also, we can just reach out to Kahala Center for their back pocket list, but the best resources we found was, who bought insurance recently and who do they call. There was 4 or 5 that we called, and I'll share those with you guys. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And we do have someone who uses QuickBooks. I'd love to hear if you're happy with it, or if you found that transition to be smooth or bumpy.
I also use QuickBooks, and it's smooth.
Good. Good to hear. And then that makes it really easy, because you're using it for your tax reporting. You're using it for for your insurance claims. And so it's, you know, you don't get into a mess where you're recalculating the numbers every time and then coming up with something different.
And what about those applying for credit? Say you want to apply for credit in 2 years. How could you start using QuickBooks to get yourself set up? I know this is a little bit off topic, but they're pretty all, you know, they're all kind of related, because once you start that record keeping, you know, kind of insurance and credit, and this is all kind of part of getting, you know, different phases of your business. Some are,
Right.
some of us in the cohort are getting started, others are further along the way.
Yeah, the bank and or FSA, whoever it is that you're going to, is going to be asking for profit and loss statements and balance sheets to figure out, you know, where's the revenue coming from, you know, what's your trajectory, and they're going to want to see those going back for a number of years. So the better records you can provide gives them faith that your business is a stable one and one worth, you know, worth banking on. So it makes a big difference. Keep any of those questions coming. I have content that's going to move a fair bit quicker now, because we're going to be transitioning. I have one more crop insurance product to show you, and then a lot more other insurance for other scary risks. Our last one is called NAP. It stands for Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. It's like they just cut out that C and B part in the acronym, NAP. NAP is weird. You buy it through FSA, not through insurance agents. So call Jason. NAP is for folks that can't insure their crop in another way. So let's say WFRP, you only produce one crop, so you can't do WFRP, or you don't file a Schedule F, or any number of other things. Actually, I think you still have to file a Schedule F, but you don't have your per crop revenue, etc. This could be the product for you. Now, your losses have to exceed 50%. And what you get is you get half, 55% of the average market price of the crop generally. So we're going to go back to that 47 cents a pound for papayas, cut that in half. And so you can get 20 some odd cents per pound for your papaya, but your losses have to exceed half of what you were expecting to harvest. That's really, really, really low. So you're basically going to get like a quarter of the price that you expected to receive for that crop. To a lot of farmers, they say, oh my goodness, well, that's not really going to help. But the deal is exceptionally sweetened by this product being free to beginning limited resource, socially disadvantaged veteran farmers or ranchers. So if it seems like you might fit one of those categories, hey, for free, then this is just money in your pocket if you do experience a loss of more than 50%. Now, if you don't fit one of those eligible for free, the price is still pretty affordable. It's a service fee rather than a premium. It's called a service fee. And it's the lesser of $325 per crop or $825 for your whole farm. So, not bad. It's something to think about. But again, you're going to get about a quarter of the price that you thought you would. I have heard good experiences about buying this product. Fairly straightforward, lower paperwork burden. Many people already have a relationship with FSA, whereas they may not with a crop insurance agent. So this could be a good strong one to kind of dip your toe in the water. And it's really geared towards beginning farmers. So keep that one in mind. Livestock insurance is really bad for the state of Hawaii. We do have a policy. It's called LRP, Livestock Risk Protection. It compensates for price declines on feeder cattle. Price declines. So all of a sudden, the market for beef collapses unexpectedly. You can get some compensation for that collapsing price. But this is very different because it's not, this is not an acts of God policy. If your cattle die, there's a fire or something like that, there's not something for that. It's only for price declines. So it's not a great policy for a lot of folks. So that closes out our discussion of crop insurance products. Before we leave it completely, I will say that insurance for most anything is available in the private market if you really want it and you have the money to pay for it. So if you don't like any of these products, of course, you could always go to an insurance agent and say, look, you know, nothing's going to cover me for exactly what I want. What'll it take? And a really good insurance broker, a business broker, is going to be able to find you someone who will sell you a policy. Just might cost a lot. So nothing's ever outside the realm of possibility. It's just how much will it cost? Those are our federally subsidized policies, and that's what makes them affordable and widely sold. Now I'm going to transition to talking about injury risk. This is a big one that it definitely hit our list when we talked at the beginning. I spent all that time on production risk, and I will admit nobody ever said I'm worried about a windstorm or a volcanic eruption, but we had to cover our bases. Now we'll get on to what people did say. Someone's going to get hurt. So injury, how does that work? I'm going to tell you a little story. We've got Farmer May. So let's say that Farmer May grows some diverse fruits on her property, and she has a farm stay program for folks who are looking for a long vacation on a working farm. She also has some dairy goats, and she provides the milk to a local cheesemaker. Folks love her. The community loves her. Her property is, you know, scenic, you know, and it keeps the land in agricultural production. So one day, a nonprofit education organization comes to her and says, can we host a farm tour and a fruit tasting event on your farm? We want to have some kids. They're going to try your fruit. She said, well, that sounds great. Sure. So they planned this little family-based event. Folks brought kids of all ages, and it was a really friendly atmosphere. Now, at one point, Farmer May takes a tour. She takes a crowd of about 20 folks of mixed ages through the kidding barn where she's got her goats. And one kid decides to scare another kid, jumps on their back, and they fall into an elderly person who gets trampled by some goats. So this person, because they're elderly, they end up with a broken collarbone and they have a wound on their shoulder. So right away, they take the elderly person, we'll call her Jean, they take Jean to the emergency room. It's no problem. Jean has health insurance. She gets seen by a doctor. The doctor's like, what happened? Oh, you know, trampled by a couple of goats. So they patch her up. She heads out on her way. And the event turns out all right in the end. Now, the nonprofit is worried and they offer to cover Jean's expenses. And she says, nope, no worries. I have health insurance. We'll be fine. So my question for you is she fine? What do you think might happen?
She could sue the farm or the nonprofit.
She could sue the farm or the nonprofit. Yep. Okay, let me flesh out for you, because you're on the right path, exactly how she might end up suing the farm or the nonprofit. Okay, so we're going to get deep into the insurance weeds here. So what might happen next is that Jean's health insurance company takes a look at this bill. Okay, we've got an emergency room visit. We've got a broken collarbone. You know, she's going to have some follow-up care. And so they're looking literally at Jean's records. And they see in the medical records that she was trampled by some goats. So they start thinking, what does Jean have with some goats? Goats aren't normal. And they think, gosh, she was somewhere else. She wasn't at her house. She didn't just fall down the stairs. Where was she? So they see some dollar signs. They say, okay, if she wasn't at home, if she was somewhere else, that means that person might be responsible for how Jean fell over and why she got trampled by some goats. And as soon as they see that opportunity, they see that she was somewhere else. This is why I had to come up with a story with something distinctly farmy like goats involved, because that's what's going to tip off the insurance company that she was somewhere else. So the health insurance company literally calls up Jean and says, hey, tell us a little bit more about this collarbone break. Where were you? And Jean says, I was at Farmer May's. You know, it was just a tour, you know, some rowdy kids, some goats stepped on me. Now, she's happy to tell them because she doesn't have anything to hide, but she also has to tell them. The terms of her health insurance require that she provide the health insurance company with information about where and how she was injured. And if she doesn't, they don't have to pay for that injury. And that is actually in the fine print of insurance that we all buy. So they listen to Jean's story and they say, oh, goats. Yes, definitely. We are going to go talk to Farmer May. And in fact, we're going to sue Farmer May. Well, Jean might say, oh my goodness, no, you can't sue Farmer May. She's a good person. This wasn't her fault. You know, this was just some kids. It doesn't matter in this case if Farmer May is a good person. It doesn't matter if Jean actually wants to sue her. The other thing that's buried in the contract of the health insurance policy that we all sign is we give away the right to sue in our own name. And we give that right to the insurance company. They can sue in our name for any injuries that they pay for. So the key thing I want you to learn from this is that when it comes to injuries, this is about health insurance companies. This is not about whether Jean is a vindictive, litigious person. She's not. Her health insurance company wants to be paid back, though. They don't want to pay for that injury, and they have a financial incentive to sue Farmer May, and they can, and they probably will. So it looks like Jean is suing Farmer May, but she's actually not. It's her health insurance company. So the other point that I want to make for you is it doesn't matter how nice Jean is. It doesn't matter how nice May is. We're not in the driver's seat. This is about a product that we bought on the marketplace and the terms of our contract. So what happens is Farmer May goes to her mailbox and finds a notice that she's being sued by Jean via Jean's health insurance company. So this will not make Farmer May happy. She will panic and she will say, oh my goodness, am I liable? Oh wait, it's not Bob, it's May. Is Farmer May liable for May's injury? The question of the day. This is a very important question because if she is, then she is responsible for those medical bills. And she is if she was negligent. So what's negligence? You can see it right here on my slide. She's negligent when she acts less reasonably than the average farmer would have acted under similar circumstances. So let me point out a few key words. Average farmer. Under similar circumstances. Farmer May is very unique, but yet the law will still try to determine what the average diversified fruit and goat dairy producer in Hawaii would have done under similar circumstances. There's probably not a person similar to her, and that's what makes this so unpredictable. We have no idea what a judge or a jury would think. Oh my goodness, who are they going to decide is the average farmer and what that average farmer would have reasonably or not done? These are now sophisticated legal arguments. And what's going to happen is Farmer May's attorney is going to come in and say, oh my goodness, what Farmer May did is what every single farmer does. Every farmer does this. Every farmer hosts tour groups of 20 people. Every farmer takes them through the kidding barn. Children are always rowdy, and elderly people are not knocked over and trampled by goats. This was very strange, very unusual. Well, Farmer Jean's attorney is going to say, no, this never happens. 20 people is way too big of a group size, and nobody takes them through the barn with animals in it Of course, that's a risk. And of course, we don't let rowdy children go on tours because of course they're going to roughhouse and knock people over. Who's right and who's wrong is not up for us to decide. It's for the judge and the jury. And this is a mess. This is a bad situation. And what we need is an attorney, because the attorney is the one who's going to dredge up the right evidence about the average farmer and make the sophisticated arguments that are going to win the day. What this means is the fundamental thing the farmer needs is insurance. And I'm not talking about insurance for the payout. I'm not talking about the money the insurance company will pay in the end. I'm talking about the attorney. Farmer needs the attorney to have a chance of being found not negligent so that she can avoid payment. The insurance company is the one who will give her that attorney. And they'll give her the best that they can afford, because that is what will determine if they end up paying out on that policy or not. So all the good attorneys out there who specialize in these kinds of claims are often bought up by insurance companies because they have the most financial stake in making sure that that person is found not negligent and no payment is made. So think of insurance not only for the payout that it provides in the end on an injury, but for the attorney that they're going to provide you. So insurance is a single best risk management strategy when it comes to injury liability. And it's necessary no matter how safe your farm is. You could be doing everything right and be exceeding all of, all the standards and being way better than your peers, but you're still going to have to prove it in court. You're still going to have to prove it to an insurance company. So we've got to focus on getting insurance. And the bad news is that many farms don't have liability insurance that addresses the risks they are actually experiencing. So here are some of the practices that many farms are involved in that are not covered by basic liability insurance. Agritourism. So things like that farm stay, things like the tour, events, classes, on-farm poultry processing, any value-added production like food processing, dehydrating, CSA drop sites, especially, another to go back to our list at the beginning of today's time together, food safety liability. Often not covered if someone gets sick from eating your product under a standard liability policy. Farmers market sales are also often not covered. So in all of these situations, what you've got to do is talk to your insurance agent. You have to really spell out for your liability insurance agent everything that you're doing, to the point where you're like calling them up and saying, I've got a tour next week. It's going to be about 20 people. It's free. Am I covered? And they might say, no, you're not, but I'll write you an event endorsement. It's going to cost you $20 for an event endorsement, and then you'll have coverage for your event. So it really can be very easy. What it hinges on is, do you have a relationship with your insurance agent where you can actually call them up and say, I've got a tour coming next week. Can I have some coverage? And they'll get it for you. So that's another commitment that we really want you to think about making at this point. The crop insurance is one agent, but then your liability insurance agent is another one. And it's a really important relationship to managing the risk of injury from goat tramplings, falling in a hole, food safety liability, all this good stuff. Just like with crop insurance agents, the best way to find a good liability agent is to ask your peers. Who else has bought liability insurance, and do they like it? So that's our next show and tell moment. Has anyone had an injury on their operation, and what happened? And does anyone have liability insurance that they feel really comfortable with, and an insurance agent that they feel positive about? No, I get that a lot. It's a real bummer.
I have one that is I feel like affordable, but now that you're saying these things, I'm like, am I covered for that? I don't even know. So I guess I gotta call them and ask.
Right. That happens a lot. Just because it's affordable doesn't mean you don't have coverage for those things, but it is more of an indicator, you know, especially if you're doing things like having tours, events, and, you know, any of that kind of stuff, because that stuff, that is where the risk lies, is when strangers and not farm familiar people come to your property. It can take a lot of trial and error to find a good insurance agent. And it is really a bummer that you have to do this work, that you have to call them and then you say, hey, you know, I'd like to explore coverage for my CSAs. And they say, what's a CSA? And then it's like, oh man, do I have to teach them everything? And so you can try talking to a few more agents to see if you can get someone who understands the basics of what you're doing, but you might not. And then you do have to educate them. That's a kind of a bummer. A similar strategy though, if you can combine forces, if you can reach out to one insurance agent and say, hey, I've got a crew of, you know, 3 or 4 of us. We all need liability insurance for our operation. Will you talk with us? And then they're like, ooh, not just 1 commission, but 4. Yes, okay, I will talk with you. I will invest in my own knowledge to understand your situation and find you a competitive policy. I talked with another farmer who had a really brilliant idea. She would get quotes from a variety of insurance agents for liability policies. And some of them would be cheap and some of them would be expensive. So she'd take the expensive one and give it to the person who gave her a cheap quote and say, why did they give me one that was expensive? Is it that much better than the one you're trying to sell me? And so she'd like make them educate her instead of having to figure it out herself. Any other thoughts on this before I move on to a different kind of risk? Another risk. How bad are facilities and property things? So let's talk about this transition point between farm production and farm property. Here, the obvious things that we're talking about are houses. But if you don't own a home, this could be barns, it could be pack sheds, it could be washing facilities, it could be you know, the place where you store expensive equipment or cheap equipment. Maybe it's your washing equipment or your harvesting equipment. Maybe it's just things like inventory, packing boxes, you know, other tools that you use for harvesting. All of that kind of stuff is of course not covered by crop insurance. Of course, it's not covered by liability insurance. This is property. And so this stuff gets covered by a property insurance policy. We tend to use the phrase property insurance when we're referring to things you own, but if you rent, it just goes by the name renter's insurance. It's the same function. It covers your movable and immovable things, you know, your barns and equipment and all that good stuff. So this covers you from similar sorts of perils, as the insurance industry calls them, your acts of God, you know, your windstorms and you know, volcanoes and that sort of thing. So of course, when something bad happens, you file a claim and the insurance company gives you money, and you use that money to repurchase or rebuild that which you lost. So it seems pretty straightforward. You decide what you want covered and for how much. So you say, well, I'd like coverage for this barn. I'd like coverage for that pack shed, for this tractor, and that, you know, you just list out exactly what you want. You also list out exactly how much coverage you want for it. Basically, if that thing goes, if it's and this is where vandalism is covered. If that thing is vandalized or stolen, what do you want for it? A lot of times your insurance agent can recommend some things for you, you know, they could, well, what's its appraised value? What did you pay for it? But don't stop there. Sometimes what you paid for it 10 years ago and what you need for it now to replace it could be two different things, especially if that piece of equipment has become more scarce or more valuable to your operation in particular. You want to think about improving, kicking up the value that it's covered at. So this is really an analysis that you'll have to do for yourself with a nuanced understanding of what do you really depend on to run your business, and what's it going to take for you to rebuild or rebuy that thing if it goes away. Here, we also have to pay attention to that contract. Note that coverage is only provided for that listed property. So usually you have a window of like 30 to 60 days. If you buy an awesome new piece of equipment, you've got to go back to your insurance agent and get that listed specifically. You might have that 30-day window where it's automatically going to be covered at some default value, but to go beyond that, call up the agent and say, hey, I got a fancy new harvester. I'd like coverage at this value. Watch out for those covered risks. Vandalism is usually good. Theft is often covered, but you're more secure if it's a theft that occurs after the product is harvested and being held. When it's theft from a field, that can be really tricky to find coverage for. And the reasons are kind of obvious when you think about it. It's because it's really hard to protect against theft from that's in the field, that's still in production. You may not be able to fence your property, lock the doors, and the insurance company knows that they can't clearly understand that risk. When the product is brought inside into a place where it can be guarded and they can come out and say, that building looks secure, they're much more willing to cover it. So make sure you understand to what extent is crop theft covered. Vandalism and electrical fire, power loss, you know, like if you have a refrigerated product and you lose power for 3 days and it goes bad, these are the things that are you're most likely to get covered for. But still, you want to ask to make sure. Because maybe you'll say, well, hey, is electrical fire covered? And they'll say, yes, except if you have, you know, really old knob and tube wiring. Well, that we don't insure for. So asking the questions prompts the insurance agent to have that dialogue with you and to be thorough with you. They are obligated to be thorough with you and to answer your questions honestly. So it's good to kind of put them on the spot and make them do that. And then again, watch out for that covered value. As the years go by, make sure you are updating your property insurance to the point that you need. If you begin to develop a better quality product, you're getting a better price for it, you transition to organic, you know, make sure that your coverage for things like vandalism corresponds to the actual money that to the amount you need to be made whole. Same as with liability insurance, find an insurance agent who communicates well with you and whom you trust, and keep asking for details. So your referrals, nothing is more important than your referrals here. Folks who other people have good success with. I see a question in the chat box. What are the top 3 things you'd recommend that should be a minimum requirement for insurance coverage in a farm business? I'm a little unsure if you mean that the government should require farm policies contain, or that the client, the farmer themselves, should be asking about. So so I'll explain it both ways. Some folks look at farm insurance and they say, this is a terrible mess. You know, this is This is bad and wrong that you have to do so much work just to get an essential risk management product in place. All the coffee shops, all the childcare centers, they don't have to work this hard. This is not fair. And they think that one of the answers could be government regulation, that the government should step in and say, look, if you're going to sell a farm policy, it should cover these basic things. That's what the government did with health insurance. They stepped in, Obamacare, and said, look, a health insurance policy has to cover pregnancy, childbirth, because isn't that fair? They could do it with farm insurance. They could also step in and the government could start providing liability insurance or better and more diverse products for crop insurance. They're trying, they offered us whole farm revenue protection and now they've given us this micro version. So they are trying, the government is, to be responsive to what our needs are. But I think that actually some of the problem is that we don't know how vulnerable we are right now. We as farmers don't know that we're not covered for all this stuff. We're not covered for food safety incidences unless we ask and get a special endorsement. So the government could step in. And I would say that if they did, they should mandate that a farm liability policy covers food safety. This is a topic for another day. And we're actually doing a 1-hour webinar later in December on what farm liability policies don't cover when it comes to food safety, because they don't cover most things. What they do tend to cover is foreign object. You've literally dropped a foreign object into the salad mix and someone bites down on the screw. It's basically like chip tooth coverage. They get E. coli, salmonella, any of the other diseases, any of the other stuff that actually really matters, there's usually no coverage for those kinds of things in a farm liability policy. And if I were master of the universe, I would require that a farm policy cover that stuff. But I see India's popping up with, but what about farmers on a shoestring budget? The biggest bang for the buck. Don't even go down the path of food safety. If you're looking for bang for your buck, don't do it. You're just going to have to put your head down and form an LLC. We'll get to that because you can't afford it. The prices are terrible and they're all over the place. So food safety liability is really miserable. I would recommend it highly as like should have, and I would recommend it very low on go out and buy it because you can't afford it. So there's a lot of problems. I would say you want at a minimum coverage for recreational guests, those who come to the farm not to sell you something or buy something, but who come to look around, because more and more folks are really into agritourism. That's good on a shoestring budget. You can usually cover an event or a tour for a really cheap price. I threw out the $20 and maybe that's a little low for next week's tour, but I've definitely had farmers tell me it cost me $35 for insurance to cover that event. I had a farmer who told me it cost me $200 for the whole year. So covering your agritourism and your visitors to the farm can be really affordable. That changes if you have a pool or if you're working with a lot of children. Children are kind of accident prone. So we're talking adults and low drowning risk. So if that's what you're going for, good coverage there. And then I would say property insurance is overlooked. Most people purchase property insurance because they might have a mortgage on their property and the mortgager requires it. But a lot of people aren't thinking about consistently updating that value, especially as a property appreciates in value over the years. If you bought what you bought it for 5 years ago, it's probably worth more now. So you got to increase your coverage levels. That's also pretty good for a shoestring budget. Usually when you increase the coverage levels, you don't see the premium go up that much. And that's because you're not actually increasing the risk. Just because they're going to give you more money doesn't make it any more likely that that volcano is going to erupt.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, please.
If you have a commercial policy, yeah, but you live on the farm, can you cover your home property with your farm policy? Or how does that work?
Right. Generally, no, you cannot cover a home with a commercial policy. And that's because your commercial policy is going to be written specific to the type of farm that you have. And I don't mean, papayas as opposed to bananas. I mean, what kind of sales you're engaging in. Usually they're like, this is the wholesale production policy, and then this is the policy for people who do value added or for people who sell directly to restaurants. So it has more to do with the marketing avenue. That is not going to cover visits from your nephew for a birthday party. So when your nephew comes to a birthday party and falls in a hole, the commercial policy is going to be like, that had nothing to do with the farm. And so you're exposed for family-based injuries. And that might be fine with you because everybody has to measure their own risk, and you got to think about it from the perspective of it's the insurance company that's going to sue you. And if you remember my goat example, I had to include a goat because that's weird. That means there was something else involved. So sometimes, businesses get sued because it's like they slipped on a pile of grapes in the grocery store, and somehow this gets into the medical record, and that's how they know, there was another business involved. What I'm saying is your nephew's insurance company is maybe less likely to figure out that it happened at your house. Any other questions? I got a little bit more for you in terms of alternative risk management. We are finally moving away from insurance. Because there are, we want to take a broader look at risk, but here's our bottom line before we do make that transition. Tell your agent all the things your farm does. All the things. All the value added, where you market, who comes to your farm. Ask pointed questions about if and where coverage is provided for those activities. Pointed questions. And then if they respond to you without a paper trail, you need to create a paper trail to prove that they said you were covered. So if they call you back and they say, gotcha, covered for next week's tour, gotcha, you're good for salmonella, confirm in writing via email. And it doesn't have to be like threatening or anything. You just send an email that's like, thanks, insurance agent Sally. I'm really glad to hear that I have that coverage. You need that paper trail because they might be wrong. And if they're wrong and you don't actually have coverage for that, I hate to say it, but you sue them. You sue them because they misled you and you didn't actually have coverage for that. And then their insurance policy, which is called errors and omissions insurance, pays you. It's a huge, nasty, horrible game that we play where everybody sues everybody because we manage our risks with insurance. And this is where, a little bit of my own personal soapbox here. Everybody says, oh, Americans are so litigious. No, this is just the system Americans have created for themselves. This is the way we designed it. It's not about personal feelings or preferences. It's about insurance. And the bottom line is, if the answers you get from your insurance agent aren't satisfactory, get a new one. They work for you. There's got to be another fish in the sea that can do better by you. And that investment in that relationship is one that really can pay off over time. We're coming to our risks that are farther down on our ladder. The risks of non-compliance and then financial and debt-based risks. Okay. we can handle the non-compliance pretty easily. Some things aren't insurable. Definitely non-compliance or violation of regulatory obligations is, you're never going to get out of that one. So there's good news. You can control this risk. Unlike acts of God, you have control over whether you are violating employment laws, whether you're filing your taxes appropriately, all that good stuff. And, some education and working with some professionals are really good action steps to take at this point. So I find in my work with farmers that these are actually the issues that really cause persistent pain and sleepless nights, is these issues of non-compliance. Although it took me 2 seconds to say, do some research and work with some professionals, that's extremely hard to do. Professionals cost a lot of money. Good accountants, good attorneys cost a lot of money. Tax preparers, bookkeepers, it comes at a cost. And so there is a phase where beginning farmers really end up putting their head down, putting on the blinders, because they don't know all the rules. If they spent all the time to learn them, they wouldn't farm anything. And if you don't know all the rules, you don't know whether or not you're complying, and that's really where the anxiety comes in. There's not a perfect solution to this. Certainly making sure that you're consistently introducing into your work life some ongoing education about compliance, how to better manage your bookkeeping systems, latest tax preparation software out there, asking your peers and neighbors, do you have a good accountant? Do you have a good tax preparer? What do they cost? Do you find that to be worth it? Having those conversations and keeping these things top of mind is going to help you make that transition. At some point, you will make enough money from farming where a sleep-filled, blissful night is going to be worth the cost of the professionals who know this stuff. Now, I run Farm Commons, and we are not attorneys for hire. We exist to help you do your own education on many issues of compliance. So employment law is a big specialty of ours, food safety, those kinds of things. Look to folks like us, your extension offices, and your other nonprofit advocates for more help in understanding your regulatory obligations. More information is available now than ever, especially with the internet, on regulatory obligations. You don't have to go right to an attorney, and you don't have to pay $300 an hour to have someone teach you about regulatory obligations. But what you do need to do is schedule in that time and talk to your advocates and supporters about helping to host good programming on regulatory compliance. And try to find those accountants and tax preparers that can really help you out. Also look out for any debt that is personally guaranteed. This can happen from a bank. It can happen from, well, it usually always happens from a credit card. But if you personally guarantee debt, they will come after you to get that debt paid back, and they can take all your assets to do it. So that kind of thing is not insurable, of course. We can't insure against the fact that we might have too much debt and low ability to pay. Instead, the American way is to just take all your stuff, and it's a big bummer. I should qualify that. Sometimes you can go through bankruptcy and discharge some of this, and you can keep your home and, a primary vehicle or something like that, but you lose a lot of everything else. All is not lost. I have some extra tools. I have some things that can help us try to protect against these uninsurable types of things. Let's talk about an LLC or corporation. An LLC or corporation sets up a wall between personal and business. Debts or liabilities like injuries that fall to the farm business, only the farm business's assets are available to satisfy that debt. Debt or injuries that fall to you personally, only your personal assets are available to satisfy that. Now, what's a personal injury risk? That's when your nephew comes over for a birthday party and falls down the stairs. That's the distinction between what's a business risk and what's a personal risk. They each have their own piles of assets that can be drawn on. If it happened from the business, they pull the business assets. If it happens from your personal life, they pull your personal stuff. Bankruptcy, of course, still available. So the LLC or corporation is helpful for that. Then, if a food safety incident does occur and someone has some big medical bills and your insurance doesn't satisfy them, they can't take your home. They can't get at your personal assets. They can't get at your retirement account or, your personal property somewhere else. It is not, an LLC or a corporation is not a good substitute for insurance. The first thing you want is insurance, because insurance prevents your assets from ever being taken at all. They get you the attorney. They pay out on that liability. So personally and business-wise, always focus first on insurance. But if insurance fails you, this is another thing to look at. Belt and suspenders, they call it. So it's worth it. It's also really affordable. I mean, insurance is going to cost you hundreds of dollars. An LLC or a corporation, not going to cost you much at all. You form it once with the state of Hawaii and you're good. So that's a good one. Another issue I want to talk about is agreements. Think about which vulnerabilities you can resolve by talking about it. I'm referring to lease-related vulnerabilities. You lease land and you're worried that the landowner's actions might cause a fire, might get someone injured, might, lead to loss of your crop. Use that lease to manage that risk. Right into the lease. You, landowner, will pay me back if your actions cause me to get injured or cause my customers or my guests to get injured. You will pay me back if your actions cause, a fire that, where my product is lost. Take a similar approach to your sales relationships. If your buyer backs out on you, to what extent can you use that sales contract to still get some compensation, or at least to get enough lead time to find another buyer for that? You are entitled to these things. You are entitled to whatever you want to negotiate for and can negotiate for. And this is also where working with other farmers is very powerful. If one farmer says, I would like 1 month of notice if you're not going to buy my product. Well, the buyer would be like, well, I'm going to buy from everybody else. But of course, if everybody says, no, we all want 1 month of notice, 2 weeks of notice, whatever it is, it presents a much stronger case that you can start to get the buyer to accept that term. Early on, I talked about the very persistent risk of disagreement between partners, especially between family members. Family members are often farm together. It's a strong American tradition of farming with our spouses and our children and our grandparents. But family has a way with each other, and we have a way of not talking about things when it's among family. That can be really problematic over time. We're not talking often about the different markets that we want to pursue, the different values that we have for the business, a different future for, you know, how we're going to make money, or who we're going to transition to. That stuff becomes so toxic over time and is actually the death knell for a lot of farm businesses. So if we're talking risk management, I'd do a disservice if I didn't talk about managing those interpersonal risks. We can do it. We can do it. It's not insurance, it's a partnership agreement. We just have to talk it out. We have to talk about, okay, when are we setting a budget? When are we reviewing if the budget is on track? What spending do I get to decide on? What spending do you get to decide on? Can we state a goal? I love when farmers especially use the holistic farm management techniques here to really articulate their vision and their values. It is amazing. If you could tie a holistic farm management goal and strategy into your actual partnership agreement, where you say, look, we're going to revisit, you know, our goals periodically. We're going to review whether the marketing strategies that we're using are consistent. It seems a little not concrete, but boy, those are some of the best investments you could ever make in risk management. Again, there's hours and hours we could spend on that. I'm just sneaking it in here at the end so that we're covering all our bases. We got to go back to another fundamental of good decision-making often rests on record keeping. Understanding your cost of production is extremely important in the long term. When you understand your cost of production, you can spot vulnerabilities. Which of your products are costing you the most? Can you compare that to revenue? Which of the elements of your cost of production are highest? It's probably labor. Well, then you know, when you can clearly understand that, you know how vulnerable you are. If you had to raise the wages that you're paying, what would that really mean? How quickly would your cost of production meet your revenue or exceed it? So understanding cost of production is really the basis of a lot of good decision making from the farm, and you can't get there without record keeping. Now, this stuff can be annoying to really diligently track, like hours spent in this aspect of pest management and hours spent in this aspect of harvest or product preparation. But that stuff, again, is really important. And it can be good if we get back to that family stuff. It can be really good to be able to say, look, I know I'm in charge of marketing, but do you know how much time I spend on marketing? This is how much time. It can be the basis for really good dialogue amongst partners so that they really understand what each is contributing to that business. And of course, you're in a position to buy whole farm revenue protection. Without understanding your cost of production and how much money you're making on them, you're just not eligible for that policy, which is powerful because you get your actual revenue. So focus on the software that we mentioned earlier, things like QuickBooks that are designed to be really approachable for small business owners to start using them. QuickBooks will provide you with a lot of free training to make sure that you know how to best use their software. They want you to be successful. They want you to be, you know, a lifelong customer of the QuickBooks products, or Peachtree or Quicken or any of the other ones out there. So take a look at some of those software products to track expenses and prepare financial reporting. Talk with your peers, see what they're using and what they like. We got one recommendation for QuickBooks already. So now's our chance to reflect. Based on what you've heard today, where do you see your greatest opportunity to create resilience on your operation in this moment? Some of the key action steps that we want to highlight that are important to this project and to India are to reflect on calling an insurance agent. Is that the right step for you? And before you get there, what about talking to some peers about their insurance agents and then making that call? What about talking with FSA? Is getting on FSA's radar, talking about the NAP insurance program? Maybe that's the right step for you. So we'll get to some questions, but when we have 5 minutes left. But I also want you to know that you have an opportunity to connect with me to discuss in more detail things that we have talked about today. This is an opportunity that you can take advantage of now or later. Like let's say that you want to talk to a couple of insurance agents or take a look at a few things or ponder some things. You can also reach out to me in a month. Here's a quick and easy way for you to sign up for a 30-minute meeting with me to talk about how your progress is going, to talk about some things that you've learned, or if you just need more clarification on anything we discussed here. If it's like business structures, contracts, sales, I've got more information. I can pass it along. So feel free to sign up to talk with me. I'll reach out to you beforehand and I'll say, hey, quickly shoot me an email about what's on your mind, and I'll make sure that I'll show up prepared and ready to get you some resources to help you move forward. Otherwise, we got more time for any questions that have popped up. Ivy is saying, could we save a copy of this presentation? Yes, India, if I can get you a copy of the PDF version, you can just send that out.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that'd be great. And if it's okay, Rachel, I'm gonna make you back to co-host so I can launch this poll. That was so good. Yeah. I mean, I think the storytelling, we could probably all see ourselves in a lot of this. This is like not a very fun topic, but thank you for walking us through all these nuts and bolts. I mean, something as simple as getting renter's insurance to cover our tractor or cover, our wash pack station that we just bought sounds like a really easy first step. Registering with FSA if we haven't. It doesn't cost anything, and then you can qualify for any credit or any kind of programs that you'd want to. So it's or disaster relief. You have to be in their system. So I'm going to launch a poll really quick, and you guys, I'm so sorry to do this, but it's really helpful. There's a lot here. There's only 3 questions. Yeah, thank you, Crystal. I see that you're saying you learned a lot. So yeah, okay, great. Are you seeing these comments, Rachel?
Oh yeah. Thanks, folks. I'm really glad.
Yeah, you walked us through so much. So thank you. It's a lot to process. But if you guys can just look at question 1, 2, and 3, you can reply to 4 if you want, but just you can select multiple, but I just want to get, kind of read the pulse out there. I can purchase that book for you guys probably as a resource. The Fearless, Yes, Time to Talk to Insurance Agents. Awesome. Are you guys able to see the poll? Oh, launch. I didn't launch it. Thank you. Okay. You guys can see each other's answers here too, but you can fill out multiple answers. Are you guys able to do this on your end?
Yeah, it does say that panelists can't vote. So it's like we have to demote everybody.
Back to, oh God, sorry. I have to move you back to attendees. Okay, I'll do this really quick.
I do it for you, but I can't.
No. Try and move everyone back really quick, but it's going to help me. This is like, we're trying to move ourselves towards action. We can do a lot of talking, but really what we want to come out of this is not having a lot of to-do lists, not to feel overwhelmed, but we want to move ourselves towards definitely figuring out the cost of production, which is what we will finally come to our results at our next meeting on November 2nd. But we also want to take an action, you know, if we can. Rachel laid out some very simple actions. So this is kind of, I got you, Remy, moving you over to attendee. Got you, Noe. And Noe, I see that you got into the COVID reimbursement program just in time. So, you know, we're lucky. Jason's such a personable person. I mean, for him to give us his cell phone number at 4 o'clock and say, go ahead and send everything in till 6, I'll stay here and wait for you. That was pretty, yeah. Hey, Lacey, you saying Jason is amazing. So we've got support. A lot of this, you know, like if you guys can fill out this poll, I can get a pulse. You know, I think we can probably purchase that book for those who are interested in it. The Fearless, what's it called?
Fearless Farm Finances.
Fearless Farm Finances. I think we could purchase that. We would do that for you guys if it's what you need to have something in your hand to feel like I'm going to take the next step. We can help identify some agents that we might reach out to. From my personal experience, I think it really would help to use that strategy that Rachel talked about to say, hey, I have others interested. Because I don't know how much they really get paid, especially off from small farms. It's kind of like we have to get their attention. They don't really want to work with us. We're a lot of work for them versus what they'd get from us. So I do see that as an important strategy. You know, if we want to do additional training, I'm starting to learn that, you know, it's really important. Cost of production is a foundation that can give us so much, but also getting towards the balance sheet and having that profit loss sheet are just two basic kind of business management financial practices that are good to do on your own. Eventually, if you guys, you know, end up moving towards getting an accountant, they still recommend you guys do these first books on your own so you understand your business. So this is all like, as farmers, we're business owners, you know, we are ecologists, we have all these hats we wear. So this cohort's about helping you through, you know, you guys are checking in almost once a month for these times where we are trying to take care of some of this business together. So yes, please email me if you want to schedule a one-on-one, and then Rachel, I'll kind of gather all of those and we could do some 30-minute sessions. When you email me, if you can be specific about what you want to go over, I'd ask everyone that, you know, you can do some homework first. And then our next, we only have 2 more gatherings. It's the 11th, the 2nd of November. That's when we're actually going to, Rachel, we're calculating after we've already done our time studies and figured out our input costs. So, you know, a lot of labor costs, and then we're going to finally kind of together do our calculations. We focused on 1 crop, and from November to February, we will decide if we want to take on other crops or multiple crops, or how we want to use that information. And then in February, Tanya Murray of Oregon Tilth and her partner Josh Folk will do an in-person. We're looking at a half day to full day in-person workshop where we will actually look at how to do decision making, how to use all of this cost of production information, how to relieve some of our anxieties. Our goal is to get to a place where we can sleep well at night. We feel like we have a good pulse on our farm business here. We're not wondering how much we need to sell, and we're always busting our butts to just sell as much as we can. And we're feeling bad about the pricing that we're putting out there. So we can say, no, I had to raise my price. Here's all the costs that, you know, have gone into this. And then, you know, we've got great, you know, a lot of us are in communities. We've got great community supporters who want to support us and really value our work. So the more that we can kind of have our businesses dialed in, show the cost of production, if we need to raise prices, put that out there, the more that we can know, you know, what our break even is. And hey, you know, like this is what our cost is. We're making money on this crop, or this is what our sales goals can be. You know, this is the kind of decision making. So this February workshop, this final workshop is really, how do we use all of this? And we covered a lot today as far as how this record keeping information is critical in going ahead and showing some of the insurance agents that we work with and any creditors that we do have a handle on what what our revenue is and what our trajectory is and what our stability is, and we know our inventory, we know what needs to be insured. So thank you. I talked a lot. We're 5 minutes over. I can't. Is it, Rachel? Is it 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock for you?
11.
11. Okay. So 1 hour before midnight. We owe you so much. If you guys can go to her website and just check out what she's built, you've revamped a lot and made it a lot more kind of subscription oriented so that you can subscribe to some of this education. I really liked your message that, you don't need to pay someone. We don't need, a topic. There's a lot that we can tease out and we can set this, we can set 1 month out of every 3 months or quarterly. We can set some time aside for us. I see one new message and then we will say a hui ho. We're getting such nice messages from everybody. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and I'll say hui ho till our next meeting, which is in November. And then you guys, our final one isn't till February. So there is opportunities for one-on-one. There is opportunities for us to use the power of our network, of us not being alone in this. And so this is a great application. And thank you guys all for logging on. Okay, I'm gonna end this now. This recording I'll put out to you guys and I'll share the poll also. I'll also share the list of insurance agents that we've reached out to. And if you guys want me to purchase that book for you, I can look at our budget. If you want me to get more training for you, we can do that too. I'm writing a new proposal and that could be part of it now. So, okay, hui ho. Thank you guys.